Thanks. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone who could escape their jobs early enough to join us. This open house will go until 6 o'clock until we get to a closed session. Just to give you a quick overview of all the different things we're doing tonight, we're going to do a little what we're calling a master plan update open house. The principal with UDA, Rob Robinson, is going to give a short kind of overview of what the sort of last ideas and recommendations are for the downtown master plan. Take a few questions, and then we're all going to hang out and answer questions, let you all kind of look a little closer at some of the sort of big ideas that we have hanging up. And then at 6 o'clock, we're going to go into city council work session, and UDA is going to answer specific questions back and forth with the city council, really give them a chance to kind of dig in on some of the things that the city and the council are going to need to do over the coming months to really make a master plan happen. And then at 7 o'clock, for those of you who like a slightly less formal atmosphere to your planning effort, we're actually all going to relocate. We're going to take these drawings as well. We're going to go up to Green Bus Brewing, just on the other side of the square, rehang them, and provide what we're calling kind of a master plan social, where we can kind of hang out. You can buttonhole any one of us one-on-one, ask us about what's going on, give us some suggestions. Again, this is as far as the master plan has gone, which means it is still on paper. And if things are still on paper, they can be changed. So if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, you have comments, there is still plenty of time to do it. If you have friends who could not make it at all tonight, for any time, this will get posted on the Big Picture website, and we will provide opportunities to comment on that as well. So it's still going to be a little bit of time before we've got opportunities to comment. I know Miss Reed is very keen to make sure that her opinions are heard, and we want to make sure they're heard as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Robinson. He is with UDA. He has been a fantastic partner in this effort. He's going to kind of walk you through what we've done so far and where we are, and then we'll go into the open house from there. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dennis. Hey, thanks everybody for coming out and talking with us a bit about what we've been up to and what we've been hearing from Huntsville over the past number of months. We started in January, actually, with a meeting with Dennis and the team at the city. And then we came back in February where we had our session with an open house session at the Art Museum, which was amazing for us. We got a lot of great input, heard a lot about what should be done, what could be done, what isn't here, what should be here, what are the most important priorities for folks. And we use that as a springboard to start testing ideas. And our method is to listen first, try to understand the context, and then begin to draw through ideas so that you can see them, you can respond to them, we can change, and we can begin to modify and work towards a place which really builds on the momentum that's happening here. So this is a little bit of a different effort than a normal master plan, big scale master plan effort. You guys have been doing planning, particularly with the big picture. You have a lot of ideas and initiatives that are already in place. You also have things that are what I'd call popping here. You know, lots of stuff is going on. You've got, in a way, the first wave of new inhabitants in the downtown that have just arrived in the last few years. It's a fundamentally different position for a lot of cities to begin to take that kind of new use and a new way to sort of live in downtown and use your downtowns. Not like in the old days. So things have changed a lot. So what do we do? You know, what do we do to build on that momentum? So our window has been to look about a 5-year plus window. What should we be thinking about now, given everything that's sort of in play and things that are going on? What would help reinforce those investments that have been made? Why are people coming? What can we do to enhance that and improve it until we get to the next step where you'd be asking those questions again? Sometimes it's great and you need to dream 25, 50 years into the future. Some of the proposals you'll see coming from us go a bit beyond the 5 years, but it's about starting to set up that next wave. So I'm going to be pointing up at the screen, and a lot of this is over in the boards as you see this. This is our kind of talking about where we've been. We just talked about that when we were here early, just listening and understanding what's going on in Huntsville. Then we came and we set up at UG White for a week and started testing ideas with folks. So we draw, when people talk to us, we draw it. Folks say, that's not exactly what I had in mind. We draw it again. And we try to get to answers by understanding the sort of essential issues by doing that. So we did that for a week here. And then we're back into this phase of making sure that we've got consensus on priorities. Because there are zillions of ways to spend public money and private money, to spend your energy and time. What are the things that are rising to the top that seem to be the most important? And so these are our recommendations. These are not hard and fast policy of the master plan. We're here talking about what we've heard, what we've seen, and what we think is going to be very important going forward. Huntsville's in a competitive position. For years you've had a market that's been very unique, and you still have it with the Redstone Arsenal and all that goes on here in the life of this city. It's unique in the country that way, but you're also competing for the best talent to make that work here. And let me tell you, cities understand that they're in this competitive environment, and they are all focused on getting that same talent to their city. So we like to understand why people are going to different places and kind of, how is the competition? What is it that you have that others don't or couldn't get? And what is it that's attractive to our current market? So we're in, I'm not a millennial, right? I'm from the old guard. And there is a whole new way that people are making decisions about where they want to live, where they want to start a business, and where they want to raise a family. So what we heard here when we're thinking about the downtown in relationship to the rest of the neighborhoods in Huntsville and other great things in this region is specifically, how does this play a role in the life of the community, and what is it about this downtown that we need to pay attention to and think about? So what we heard a lot of is this notion that downtown needs to be a unique place in the region, that it can't be just like a suburban center in the hinterlands. It's got history, it's got a whole character to it, it's got a perception about being the heart of a city and being the heart of a region. So this notion that more and more unique and diverse destinations in the downtown was something that people generally agreed on. We saw that comment a lot in our first meetings. Need more residents downtown, and you do. You're getting them, but you need, we find, to have a kind of vibrant place, you need a much higher mix of residential development. The old days of commercial downtown, this is where everybody went to shop on Saturday, go to the dentist, go to the dock, go to school. Those days are gone. They've been long gone for a while. So downtowns have found themselves competing with other districts within their city for that same business, and they're not very good at getting it because it's moved and it's changed in its fundamental nature. But downtowns can offer other things that you can't find outside, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. Attracting local businesses. You guys have a virtual giant magnet out west of here into Cummings Research Office Park and Redstone Arsenal. You get jobs, you get employment, you get businesses. But folks have talked about a different scale. Very local, very much Huntsville, very much businesses that want to thrive in an environment that's alive 24/7, rather than being in an office park environment or in a kind of segregated uses, I'll say, where it's only sort of one thing that goes on there. And this is really driving the economy of so many of our cities and towns. It doesn't matter what the size is. People are really choosing to be in the town because there are things about it that are very attractive and supportive for them. One refrain we heard a lot, even though you have the great Von Braun Center that brings so much to the city, is this finer grain of arts and culture in the downtown. And we see little pieces of it, but there's a yearning for how can we do more of that here? Because those are uses and those are kinds of amenities that need to be in an area that draws a concentrated population. It's tough to bike around here, tough to walk in the downtown a little bit, because so much over the years, it's kind of been taken away. It's been taken away by the automobile, like in most of our cities. You guys have this very, and I've talked about this a little bit before, fine-grained pattern of blocks and streets. It's tiny. It's beautiful for walking and living in. Not so great if you're trying to develop a block and park all the cars that we need today in the same block. So what's happened over time is you've dug out small buildings that used to completely fill the downtown and filled them up with small parking lots. So when we talk about connectivity in a downtown, it's when you walk through a district or a precinct and you think about all the great places that you'll go just to walk through the district and see what that's all about, that's kind of fundamental. If you don't have that, if you can't get it back, you're in a really tough position to compete for why would I be here? You know, why wouldn't I be somewhere else where there's a lot easier way to get around? Connectivity is completely different. So we think that one of the big takeaways here is that this is a relatively easy thing to do if everybody wants to do it, and that is take back your city. Take it back and share it a little bit better. And it becomes an amazing thing when that happens. And we're seeing it almost in every place that we're in these days. And so we think it's a great opportunity here, and there are a lot of folks who support that. And then the last one on the list, not last and least, but that came through was people's love for the historic foundation for this community. So when you're in the surrounding neighborhoods, you feel it. When you're in the heart of downtown, you feel it. And how do you redevelop in a way that keeps Huntsville's sense of place and character? And that's not an easy thing to do. You have to have a real sort of sense about what that means. So what we started to do then was to look not at every place in the downtown, but areas where we thought there could be concentrated opportunity sites and initiatives over the next 5 to 7 years. And we ended up with these 6 that seem to rise to the top, and we'll talk about them one by one. The first one we talked about, how do you make this downtown bike friendly and pedestrian and walkable? How do we do that? How can we do that now? And what does it contribute? We know that as we sit here, hopefully nobody got hit by falling marble when they walked in, but this complex has sort of reached way past its time. The scale of city government is different now, requires different facilities, and the staff for the city is spread out into many buildings. So the idea that the Civic complex would be redeveloped in the near term, and it may take a long time, but would start in the near term, really starting with the municipal garage, which is at the end of its life, which has to come down and be rebuilt. How do we think about this whole area around Fountain Circle? So we think that there's a great opportunity here to also not just segregate government and civic uses from any other use, but begin to bring those uses together so that you can create a really vibrant district. And then the support and expansion of what we call the Holmes North or Holmes Clinton district is already happening here, right across from the Clinton garage, sort of in the middle of the Holmes and Clinton corridor, where you're getting development now that you can really feel the city sort of bubbling there and lots of opportunities. So how do we support that? How do we expand it? And one of the things that we were scratching our heads about a lot here is that you have this amazing magnet for the Von Braun Center. It brings hundreds of thousands of people into the downtown all throughout the year. And I dare say anybody walks across the street into any of these little local businesses in the downtown. It's close, but it feels like it's miles away. So we kept thinking, like, how do we get people who come to the center into the downtown? And then after our last episode here with folks, we reversed that. and we really realize that it's about bringing downtown closer to the Von Braun Center. So we'll talk about that idea a little bit. And then, in a way, a sort of longer-term initiative is thinking about this northeast corner of downtown. You had where the old Coke site is as you come in on Clinton. There's a lot of vacant land there. There's the Sarcee housing is in there as well. And then there are just a lot of sort of fragmented uses there. So how does that happen over time? This idea of enhancing mobility, both from the sense of making it bike-friendly but making it pedestrian-friendly, is in many ways a pretty straightforward task. So we started looking long and hard with city transportation, transit folks, and engineering groups to understand how Huntsville was working today. You know, how people really navigate through here, how cars work, where do people park, where are people walking. And what we realized is that you guys have an unusual capacity for being able to build bike infrastructure and enhanced pedestrian connections without ever changing one curb line on any of your streets. So that is a gift, because for many cities it's really difficult to do. I think for yours it's going to be actually much easier. This notion of an expanding regional greenway and trails network, can't tell you how much that's driving people to come to different regions. People love living in cities where I can get on my bike at the front door and I can bike into the mountains, down to the river, over to the lakes. In my city, old industrial city of Pittsburgh, when I first moved there, I'm a Virginia kid, but moved to that city, I couldn't bike anywhere without getting killed. And we had a mayor who was a runner, and his mission was to make sure that we got trail connections. Well, that turned into bike connections. So today I can get from my front door on a bike, on a trail, and bike to Washington, D.C. without ever getting on a road. That's a good thing. You guys have that same potential here. And you're connected in the downtown to be able to be a hub, to get to the land preserves, to get to the great amenities. So we think that just starting little and beginning to build that, that whole network is really important. And then, you know, let's just bring a little more love into the streetscapes here. You got a lot of pavement, not enough trees to walk under when you're going from one place to the next. So we put that together as a kind of menu for you to think about. And we think that a lot of this can happen in the very short term, and you can test it. You can test ideas. And that's, you know, I think that's one of the big changes that's happened when you're proposing something that really changes the system. Can you test it first, see how it works, tweak it before you make permanent changes? So one of this is sort of a list of things that we thought were on the table in a pretty close proximity. Spraggins Avenue. Well, Spraggins, which not many people drive on because it only connects a little bit of the city, actually connects one of your greenways and the Depot Park. We think we can connect that up and take it to Big Spring Park as a bikeway this year. So by the end of the year, our kind of goal with the planning team here was to get that in place. That gives you a 5K loop, which now you can have running events. If you're a runner or a biker, that's a lunchtime run. It's a big deal. It sounds tiny, but that's a big deal. And we think that's the very first thing you can do. You're already resurfacing the street, so that's been set aside. And that street, when it gets rebuilt, will have your first bike track downtown. And then a sort of corollary to that is getting a central business district parking strategy. We talked about the tiny blocks. It means that there's never enough parking, and it's really difficult to get development here because everybody perceives the need to park next to their building. This doesn't strike us yet as a culture that's changed. It's changing pretty quickly, but it's still a big issue here. So how do we increase parking capacity? Monroe, Williams, and Church Streets. Those are official NASCAR routes through your downtown. They're great for capacity traffic. They're lousy for pedestrian safety and the way it feels. So how do you do both? How can you do both and not create congestion and not and not a lot of conflict? You guys have a lot of events here. That's a big deal to manage. So we've been working through that. But that Monroe, Williams, and Church Street, we think you can do, and we'll explain that a little bit, with a spray can of green paint and some plastic bollards. And you can try it out and see how it works. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Link these parking resources together. We'll talk about that in the short term. And then continue this conversion of one-way streets, which we loved in the 1960s because it allowed you to get from outside the city through the city without having to hit your brakes and out to where you were going. So that kind of thinking treated downtowns as really a sieve, and the faster you could get through, the better. And so things have changed a lot. We realize it's really tough for retailers. It's really tough for visitors if you don't know the system and you have to keep doing the one-way thing. It's difficult. And they're typically not great streets to live on because you can go faster. There is less friction, and it works pretty well that way. So you've started that. You've done that on Clinton. There are 3 easy ones to do that. We seem to have general agreement with Finnish Homes, so that becomes 2-way, Green and Lincoln. All of those are streets that have no reason to be one-way, and I think there's general consensus within the planning groups within the city to do that. And then another big initiative that you're already into is the conversion of Pinhook Creek into a greenway through the downtown, so that it will have trails and public places along with being a flood mitigation effort within the city. So this is one of those efforts that's going back to the federal government for a Tiger grant. Hopefully Huntsville will be successful. Sometimes it takes, like with a lot of cities, it takes multiple times to apply to it. But that's a great initiative, and that's underway as well. So when we talk about this bike infrastructure, and we think about what could happen actually within the first 12 months if you have enough consensus and enough support to get it done, that all of the loop, the Monroe, Williams, and Clinton loops in the dark green, would have a 2-way cycle track. That means you've got about a 12-foot, it would have been a car lane, and bikes are going both ways. And then you have a sidewalk as well, on-street parking on the other side of it, and 2 moving lanes of traffic. So it takes one of your lanes, underutilized lanes, and converts that. And this is what I mean by testing it. You can literally, and it happens all the time now, you can literally do that and test it out for a while and see how it works before you commit to it. Because then later you'd want to add a little bit of landscape here and there once you convert those streets. The ones in the purple are adding just bike lanes on either side of the drive lanes. And you can do that. And those are about connecting to the neighborhoods, getting neighborhoods connected back to downtown, getting folks who work in downtown or who play in downtown connected out to those neighborhoods. And those are like homes. You see that when you see Gallatin going to the medical campus in the neighborhoods to the south. You see Lincoln going down, Meridian going up, which already has a bike trail on it. And you can see the dotted lines, which are your greenways. There's Pinhook in the bottom of that diagram, and then going through the Depot Park to the north. So with that little system, you guys could be connected up to all the resources around you, and I think create a very different experience in the downtown. So the enhancements that would go along with that, we talked about improving the circulation patterns. Everything in red there would be converted back to 2-way under this recommendation. And then you'd add on-street parking everywhere where you see the yellow line. So while now we have some on-street parking, the ability to add that back in a linear fashion all the way through the downtown really helps us with increasing the reservoir of shared parking that we can use here. And the other thing is beginning to think about how we slow traffic down coming through the middle of town. Like when you come across Big Spring Park, that's a big pedestrian movement back there, and nobody really knows who's going to win on that one when traffic's moving fast. So it's just paying attention to those and thinking about how you might calm that. The third leg of that stool is getting the park systems connected. So from greenways to existing parks that you have, both enhancing those with the pedestrian improvements and the bikeways and the greenways are going to be incredibly important to you as you move forward. And it really gives people another way to circulate and to experience downtown. Now, out of all of the list of those that we're looking at, there are 3 of those that are new projects. You've just finished or are finishing a renovation to Big Spring Park. It looks beautiful. And we've talked about the Veterans Memorial, which is also a big attraction, Depot Park, which has already been a part of your system. So Pinhook Creek is one of those. And we'll talk about an expansion of Big Spring Park, what we call the promenade, and then the Sprague's Bikeway, which will happen shortly here. So connecting parking resources, in this, I don't expect you to read this diagram, but on the left-hand side is kind of what you have now for garages. The red circles denote a 1-minute walk. So if you're parking in that garage, we find that most people working in downtown, if it's under a minute, it kind of works for them. If it's in the yellow circle, it's like 3 minutes. It still works, but it's got to be a great walk. And it's typically not how far, it's how interesting a walk is. If you're walking down a beautiful neighborhood, we all know how often and how long you'll walk. But that's not always the case. So we've got a sort of constellation of garages. If this gets redeveloped, the municipal garage goes out for a couple of years while a new one's being built, then you're in, then we're like, oh, okay, what do we do now? And then how do we find added capacity? One of the things that's happened over time here is that you started to lease out a lot of your parking for folks who work here. And what that means is it sort of takes it out of the pool for other folks who are visiting, or for businesses, or for hotels, or for events, things like that. That's a tough situation. So we've been looking at the numbers with everybody here, and have started to think about, over the next 5 years, how you might expand the parking resources within the downtown. We think there's a sort of key site at the Huntsville utility site, which is right off of Clinton there and Sprague's. It's a full block of surface parking. Nobody should be doing surface parking in the middle of their city ever. So that's a great opportunity site. It can come back with structured parking and also development that fronts Clinton. So we think that that's a very key site. If there's a good sort of use of public money for enhancing the parking capacity, we think that's one that should be considered early, because it is right in the core. And then the idea of being able to use more remote lots, and how do you do that effectively? So for instance, in the medical campus, they're already running shuttles all the way over here to what's called Lot K, just to the north of Pinhook Creek there. And that, we think, is something for the city to consider, certainly in the short term, and understand how it may work even in the long term. So this notion of creating for downtown workers a shuttle. And here we're showing one that's in Norfolk, which is an electric shuttle, decked out with Wi-Fi. It's a very cool thing to ride on. But it gets you to where you need to be in 5 minutes. So if I'm parking out in Lot K on the other side of Pinhook Creek, I know I can make it to my office. And I have headways, which means frequency, for getting there in the afternoon and the morning. Might be a little less frequent in the middle of the day. But that, we think, will start to relieve a lot of the issues with where can I find parking, because we can't build parking decks ad infinitum. But still, when you look at the bubbles around there, those are proposed structured parking, because we know it's in your future. Some of it's private, some of it may be public. But this allows us to have a way to begin to test the idea of how this works in Huntsville, and make it a successful way to deal with the constant issue of where do I find parking. So we've looked at these proposed little development opportunities. We talked about them early, and we'll go through them. There are 4 of these related to different districts within the downtown. The first is the Holmes North District. It's the idea of focus on this district to make a mixed-use heart. We've got to get the heart back. You got to be able to walk around the block here or a couple of blocks and the place is whole. There's a building on every street face, on every corner. Right now, it's sort of a series of buildings, parking lots, buildings, parking lots, buildings, parking lot. And you've got a lot of interest and a lot of investment on the private side here. So let's fill in the missing teeth. And we love your Washington Park. Even though it's a tiny little alley, we think it is, in a way, the seed of something really special here. So we started looking at that block between Jefferson and Washington, Clinton, and Spring Street, and then Holmes on the north. And this is one block in your downtown where you have retail that faces retail across the street. And that's usually the indicator. The only way you can have healthy retail is that you've got to be going there for multiple destinations, multiple reasons. If you don't have that, it makes downtowns almost impossible to sort of bring back as a real center of things. So you've got that going. And it's pretty vibrant, and it gets more vibrant even just the time we've been here. And it's changing all the time. And that little green band, I'm on the side here so you can see it, is Washington Park as it exists today. So there are buildings being renovated there now. Humphreys and some of those restaurants are here. UG White is on the side. This is the Clinton Avenue shops right here. Here's the garage with its shops facing it. So Washington Park is a seam in here. But it's a little printer's alley. It's this kind of hidden, what we call third place, sort of hidden world within the city. We think that there is a great opportunity to expand the whole idea of Washington Park so that it becomes another address that crosses blocks and is a whole nother layer of experience within the city. And that buildings that are in, right now where you have parking lots, buildings that get built there can respond to that by having sort of two fronts. You got a front on the Washington Park and you got a front on the street. So it gives you double exposure, and they can be very different kinds of places. So if you're ever in Charleston or Savannah, old cities like that have those muses and alleys, you know how magical they can be and how much fun it is to be part of that. So when we back out and we look at that 3-block area, this is one of the parking lots just behind UG White. Here's Washington Park right here. And you focus in a little bit, you can see the federal courthouse fronting Holmes. The downtown Huntsville link is right over here. Here's UG White. That by thinking about Washington Park as an equal address to the streets, when you redevelop that parking lot, you can create a sort of interior world and a street-based world. So you sort of kind of double your money there. You sort of double the experience that you get. And it is these kind of places that people will come from all over the region to be in. That's the kind of, we think, the kind of little alchemy that could happen here to help all the retailers who've just come in and help you grow a really unique sense of place in the downtown. So this initiative, the Clinton Avenue Gateway, was about bringing the city to the Von Braun Center. And it's around that gigantic garage that you park in when you go to an event at the VBC. This is an old idea. We're not going to claim this. You guys were thinking about this in the 1980s, I think, shortly after the garage was built. So, you know, it's just an idea whose time has come back around. What we found, you know, when we were here and, you know, did our little event over at the VBC is that you're not going to cross Monroe after an event. There's like nothing to cross for. You're facing a bunker that's sort of partially buried garage, and it runs for what would be the width of 2 Huntsville blocks. So the notion that part of that garage is old. The notion of redeveloping a portion of that garage so that it accommodates development along Monroe and along all of its edges is at the heart of this proposal. So it's to build the Clinton frontage all the way to the VBC as a mixed-use precinct, create active uses that face Big Spring Park. Your park is beautiful. It's dead on the edges. There's not a lot of active uses there. So can you use the park and create, you know, front doors on the park rather than parking decks on the park? And then this idea of sort of connecting from Big Spring Park you really connect up to where we are here. So we think it's a whole different way that you can experience the city. So when you look on the left, you see the existing garage. This is one garage. This is the older garage that's not in such great shape. And then there are empty sites along the edge. There's really no site along Monroe Street. And you see the limit line of the garage there in the dotted line. So to stay within the envelope so that we don't encroach on the park, part of that garage gets shaved off. The whole end of it on Monroe Street gets rebuilt, and you add levels to it. You add capacity to this garage. And then you line Monroe Street, line Clinton, line the garage so that you're always in front of active, fun uses when you're in the downtown. So if I come out of the Von Braun now, I'm looking at uses I could go immediately to across the street if I wanted to, or if I wanted to walk through Big Spring Park and up to the City Hall complex, I'd do that too. So it's sort of interesting. There is the sort of form of it, and you can see the area of the deck that would be reutilized. If you're on Monroe Street today, and we're looking north, the VBC is on our left-hand side, and there's the parking entrance here. This would all be shaved off because it really blocks your view of downtown. You have no idea where you are when you come out of the VBC there. And then when we add back what we talked about for the bicycle improvements and then the potential for redevelopment, we think this could be a good thing for the city and a great address along Monroe. Monroe has no active uses other than the VBC over there right now. So you can see the cycle track on this left-hand side there that we talked about that will work on Monroe and Williams as well as some of the other streets. And then just the kind of enhancement of the pedestrian zone along Monroe. So the thing that goes here, this is one of the streets, by the way, I lied, where you have to touch a curb. We opted for a much more generous sidewalk and the bike lane versus the central median that's right in front of the VBC here. Now on Clinton, if you're looking towards the downtown and Monroe is off to our right, and that's the Huntsville Utilities parking lot in the middle of town, it's the same thing. When you improve, when the bike lane goes through Clinton and you redevelop the front of that site, now we've got city coming out to Von Braun. So those are great development sites, has great capacity on it, serves both citywide functions as well as, we think, private development. And then this area, the redevelopment of Fountain Circle, from the civic core that it is now, how do we build back a city hall? What should we consider when we do that? And a lot of people talked about the square and the dream of redeveloping the county courthouse and that building. This doesn't really deal with that. What it does do is it talks about creating another corner on the square that would become the city hall site where the municipal garage is today. So that's one we tested, and we'll go through that in more detail. And then creating more development opportunities, again facing the park, across from the YMCA and the Huntsville Utilities building, so that you get active faces along and active uses along the park, as well as along Church Street, which is running north-south here. Over time, we think the frontages along Monroe Street, which are now parking lots, can be redeveloped to higher density with parking behind them as those uses change. So there are lots of things we think that are possible here. So if you look at it today, we're sort of floating over Big Spring Park, looking north towards the existing City Hall and the now vacant City Hall Annex. So that's the annex that would come down first. That's for sure. City Hall, probably consolidate a little bit. City Engineering Building is across from the Early Works Museum. And then the municipal garage would go down. So what does that do? When you take those out of play, you create 3 sites. And what we think the first thing to do is to get the parking back up. So you'd rebuild a new City Hall parking garage. This we just see as a private or mixed-use redevelopment site over time. The City Hall remains for the initial phases, and then you build a new City Hall in front of that parking garage. It's at the corner of the historic square on Fountain Circle. This would then be decanted. You could get a development along Church Street that is pretty much the same scale of the existing height of the City Hall building and set it back a little bit. The idea is to expand Big Spring Park here and create a new edge to the park. So what we found when we started studying this is that now if you want to go from Church Street up to the square, you can walk through the park. But if you at all have accessibility challenges, you can't. So because you're really climbing up the stairs. You can do this through a new promenade and make that accessible for folks. So you can walk up what is a gentle 5% slope all the way up to Fountain Circle. And if you look at it today, the real grade change is right at the road here where it drops down. And this, we think, is an addition to the park and make it an addition where it's a sort of active use at the edge of this beautifully passive park. So once you do that, then you could build the second phase of this building to wrap active uses. The ground floor indicates retail or public uses, so that this is a vibrant place taking advantage of park frontage. And you create a new address along Church Street right beside the existing AT&T building. BBT Garage is right there. And you get a new development site, again, where the city engineering building was. So we can consolidate the city departments within a new city hall building. You get some private mixed-use development to animate this side of the city, and thinking about what it could look like, what it might be in terms of form and scale, we began to test these ideas. Part of our interest here when we look at Huntsville is like, how do you build new and echo back into tradition and history? We're not in 1860 anymore, but we can build buildings that are sympathetic so that you tie together, and we think it's a material and a scale and a form. So we took a lot of our cues actually from the old City Hall. Say what you will about the marble, but it's a marvelously articulated building, and you rarely see that today. And thought about this corner of Big Spring Park and looking out across the big expanse toward the VBC and Church Street, which is a rather large street, so that we get a kind of theater, if you will, out of the park. So mixing active uses with the great public space that you have in the heart of downtown, we think could be magical. The Northwest downtown, we call this initiative. It's really a series of opportunity sites. This is where the former Coca-Cola bottling plant was. Housing Authority owns some land here. There is the Searcy neighborhood that's here. And we think that this should be a coordinated area to look at, to start looking at. It's your largest land area in downtown to be redeveloped. And we should be thoughtful about this and make sure that you can kind of keep the assets that are here and enrich the downtown. So what is impossible to do in most cities anymore is to build new affordable housing. We're all getting priced out of it. It used to be, my city was always voted the #1 city because it was affordable. That vote's off the table. It's marvelous to see downtown development, but it's expensive to develop, and it prices a lot of us out of the market. Here you have a chance. You've got a housing authority that owns land. You've got the city that's an active partner here. And then with the private sector, we think this is a great opportunity to retain diverse and affordable housing and mix it. Mix it in downtown to create a great residential precinct on the northwest side. You need this many bodies and more, and it is a great complement, I think, to the commercial pattern that's here. So when we look at it now from the air, we're floating over Von Braun, and as Von Braun Center expands and becomes even more of a generator and an asset to the downtown, the land across from it is going to continue to become, highly desirable and valuable. So what do you do with these land resources? And we think the idea of gradually redeveloping from the 1950s and 1960s housing stock that is there now. It's very difficult for housing authorities across the country to be able to get the funding to do this on their own anymore. And it's You know, it's just a fact of life. It's these resources have been taken away. But we're working in many cities which blend this and do amazing things with it, make amazing neighborhoods. And I think it's a great opportunity for Huntsville. So as you come back in here, it allows you to mix different kinds of housing types, much like the existing neighborhoods that are in the downtown. You can take advantage of Pinhook Creek. That is a growing greenway here. Bulk up a little bit when you get to Clinton, so it's more like the Avenues project. You know, it gets a little bit more muscular when it gets to one of the arteries that come into downtown, and glue this back together with the city, so, with the heart of the downtown. So you really have a kind of full range of places and of character and different mix of uses. So we think that in this period, it's time to think about this and get serious about it, because it is part of this fabric is reaching the end of its life, and it'll be redeveloped. So think about it and direct it as much as you can to the benefit of the city. So when you back out and you look at all that together, it's a pretty different downtown than it is today. And I think you guys are already headed on this track. It's just how do you do it thoughtfully and strategically so that you can continue to encourage folks to invest.